Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the second season of Reactive Land. Today, we're going to talk about internet. I hope you guys have seen this series, IT Crowd. If you haven't, watch it. It's really funny. And they have an episode about internet. I don't explain it much because I don't want to spoil it, but watch it. It's very funny. So today we're gonna talk about WebClient, which is a reactive HTTP client which helps us access internet basically. As usual, comparing the declarative with imperative. And you might remember REST template. It's deprecated now, but if you want to do blocking calls using a HTTP client that is implemented by a Spring, REST client is the option. And this is how you do it. You see it's a little hard to read. This is where you actually do the request. And it's a GET since it's said GET for entity. The semantics are not really readable. So REST template is actually deprecated in favor of web client. And how you do web client is something like this. We're gonna go through it. And even if you want to do a blocking servlet-based application, you can still use web client and do a .block at the end. We have tried the block in the first session. So in the servlet where everything is blocking, and that's fine. The only usage of web client would be the nice semantics. You can see like it's very easy to read. Actually, we haven't talked about dependencies so far, where all those mono and flux and publisher and now this web client come from. So there is a dependency set. It's from a Spring Boot. It's a starter called WebFlux. When we have that, we pretty much have everything that we have worked with so far and what we're going to work with today as well, which is web client. And here you can see the graph, the dependency graph, like web client is part of this one and this one's part of this one and so on, just to have an idea. And you can see it in our Gradle file. So I only added this, which is related to reactive programming. And there is something actually, so there is what we use is project reactor that gives us mono, publisher, flux, and everything like that. And WebFlux is on top of that. We're gonna discuss WebFlux in details later, but there is an element in WebFlux, and that's web client. We're gonna use that. Okay, so let's go through it. Web client, how to create a web client. Basically, you follow a builder pattern. You get a builder from web client, you set the base URL, in this case, a Spotify, and then you build it. So now you have a web client. You can expose this as a bean in your applications and later just use it to do the actual calls. So let's say we want to make a GET request using the same web client that we created before or any other, doesn't matter. So we inject it, we get it, and we do a GET. It's a .get, very simple, very understandable. And then URI. Here you put the path. So you set the base URL before. It's possible to put the full URL here if you don't have a base URL, because this base URL here is optional, but it's better. Usually the way that we work in our applications, we have a web client for calling, like, let's say, one of the services in our microservice architecture. So let's say like our login service or any other service. The base URL would be here, and from there on, the bean that comes out of this builder that would be used to do the actual calls. And then we only put the path here in the URI. And then we do a retrieve. So when you do this, you actually mean that I want the call to happen now. And then you get the response, and then you say that the body should be converted to type X or any other class that you know. It's basically the class that represents your response body. This is what your response will be deserialized into. And you remember do an error. So from here, after this, since it's a mono, you're going to have a mono and you can do whatever you did with monos here. You can see that I have a mono at the end. And if you want to get many elements, if you want to work with flux, it's basically the same, but instead you do mono to flux. It means that the response that you get when you call this URL contains a lot of elements of type X. So then you get them as a flux here. And the same from here, after this line, you have a flux. And we had the flux before, it's just the same. And to test it for today, we can still use the step verifier because we are creating a stream, reactive stream out of our calls. So it's the way to check it. It's just a reactive stream. It's a publisher at the end of the day. We put the publisher here and we put our expectations here. So yeah,